Hey everybody, it's Angel from Halo Inspirations. We give you inspirations to help you spread beauty and joy through your quilting journey. Happy hump day. Whoop whoop. Happy Wednesday to each and every one of you. And today we have a video drop. Yes, we do. Now this month, some of you might have been expecting a different video, but it's coming next month for those of you who have asked about the Quilt As You Go method that I am going to show. That's next month, so get ready for that. But this month we're doing the Curvy Log Cabin Ruler by Creative Grids. I have fallen in love with this ruler. When I very first started with it, it wasn't so friendly until I really started to understand what was going on. So if anybody's interested, that's what we're doing today. And if you're wondering what's a curvy log cabin, well, this is what I've made. And it looks like a circle, okay? It is a log cabin, but it looks just like a circle. Lots of fun, and it's all about strips. There's different sizes of strips and just getting that under control, but it's all strips, and you can make them even more scrappy than I have, or you can make them one color or two colors, background and then the circle in the middle to go with that. Okay, so the Creative Grids ruler, the 6-inch curvy log cabin, lots of fun. I want to warn you that I didn't realize I didn't have the right mic on, so the sound is a little different this time, and I do apologize. It was, a moment that I had. But let's go ahead and get to the cutting table. I'll see you in just a sec. So we're first going to talk about the ruler, the things you get, the things you'll need, and then we're going to start constructing the curvy log cabin with the 6-inch curvy log cabin trim tool. Super stoked about this. Okay, so something that you do get with, besides the ruler, you also get an instructional pamphlet, and of course there's the QR code here and on the ruler, so you don't have to worry about losing it. This is a good demonstration on how to utilize the ruler from Creative Grids, the maker. Okay, I do encourage you to keep this next to you to help make sure you're going in the same correct direction and to make sure your blocks are getting built the correct manner. It does have some variations for you on different things that you can do with it. There's actually a lot you can do, but those are just some of the, this courthouse block. Wouldn't that be fun in this curvy sizing? That'd be a lot of fun. Anyway, so you get the pamphlet with the QR code in case you ever fumble along, and then you get the ruler. And I will tell you, they also have a really good picture here of what we're making, okay? And the ruler itself, you have different parts. So you have your seam guide center square. And on the ruler, it does tell you, hold on, I gotta find it. Oh, you can't see it because it's on the white. But it says center square cut 1.5 inches. And they say to make sure that it's precise, okay? And then it also tells you your narrow strips, at least 1.25. I actually like 1.5, and I have 1 3/4 of my background. That's actually what I'm using for my narrow ones. My background fabric, I went ahead and did 1 3/4. I'm telling you 1.5 is plenty. They say at least 1.25. I just haven't tried it with 1 1/4, so I just like to go a little bigger, just me. But I think 1 3/4 is too big, just so you know. And then it tells you on the ruler to cut wide strips at least 1 3/4. And these prints are what I'm using for my wide strips, and I'm actually cutting mine at 2 inches. Okay, I just like that little bit of room. Okay, and you're going to see how much I'm shaving off when I do it. You can make your own decision on what you want to do with that. But on the ruler itself, you have several different squares. So once we make the first round, we have a center square. Okay, we're going to start with the center square. And Then you'll see we have two narrow round, I'm sorry, round two narrow, round one narrow, round two wide, and round one wide. And then round three is just, there's only 3 rounds. So that is your center at that point, okay? And it's got lots of dotted lines and white lines throughout to help you keep this straight. The one thing I do like about this method is that you are keep squaring as you go. Instead of waiting till the very end, when sometimes the piecing can be fun, challenging, right? And so it may not come out at the end the way that you want, and you may be struggling. So to square as you go really helps to keep the block straight, okay? All right. It also gives you that 1/4 inch seam allowance around the outside. So what are you going to need? Like I said, 2-inch strips. You have to decide which ones are going to be wide and which ones are going to be, let me grab this one. I started with white background. I wouldn't do this necessarily with black, but I'm trying to do things so you can see them better. So I decided my background, which is my narrow, don't you just love how it curves? The narrow is my background, which are at least 1 1/4, okay? And I cut them at 1 3/4. 1 1/2 would have been just fine. And then cut your wide strips, which these are my wide strips, okay? And I'm using these ones over here. They're cut at 2 inches. So I have chosen fabrics to go inside. Now, what I've also decided to do is to try to keep the rounds the same print so that you can kind of see what we're doing and understand which round is which, okay? It is done in a round. So we're going to go clockwise around the center, basically, 3 times, okay? 2 wide, 2 narrow, okay? Each round is 2 wide, 2 narrow. 4 sides to a square. Makes a lot of sense. So when I was going, well, hold on. One more thing. I will tell you, I do have a couple of marking tools, and I'm going to show you why I highly encourage this, okay? I also keep on board a smaller ruler, and I have a 12.5. You don't need something this large, but something bigger than this, and you'll see what I'm using them for. Nothing really to do with them with the size. It's all about keeping a straight line. So I'll show you that as we go. So one of the things that I always try to do with these videos is, if somebody has never used the ruler, where would the hiccups be? And I have found it's the first block. And I had I don't know why, but I had a hard time even wrapping my head around what they were doing. And I got to be real, I waited to watch the creative grids, and then I wasn't as crazy as I thought I was. Okay, so that was just so you can see the ruler. All right, so they do tell you to cut a precise 1 1/2 inch square, okay? Now, if you look at the directions, it'll show you, whoops, let me pull this over here. It will show you this white dotted line, okay, which is this white dotted line right here, okay, is to help you with your size of your square. And I will tell you, it's really, really important that when you lay the ruler down, the fabric should be on top the fabric. The ruler, the white dotted line, should be on top of the fabric, not over the fabric and not too far in, but right, just lining right with the edge on the fabric, okay? And I'll take a picture of one of these for you, and I'll put it up here so you can actually see what I'm speaking of, okay? All right, now if you will notice, this square is actually bigger than this square right here, okay? And there are also these 4 holes. I have done this a couple of ways. No matter which way you do it, You do want to go ahead if you need to keep it accurate. And I'll show you why I say that in a minute. I would go ahead and mark, okay, in those 4 holes. All right. Let's see, if you do not cut it, they're pretty equal except for one side. Okay. So I normally was cutting it. You don't have to. You do not have to cut it. But I got to tell you, it kind of made me feel a little better to do that. But I'm going to continue with this so that we can get a larger 1/4 inch. So when I take this off, you will see that this line and this line over here are actually not a 1/4 inch from the fabric, okay? So that's where I felt like got a little confusing. And I actually have a way that I do this. So what I like to do to help me at the sewing machine is I personally like to connect the dots, okay? So whenever you're connecting the dots, I'm going to turn it. I like to have my ruler so that this little guy is going to help me know that my line is straight, okay? Again, I'll try to take a picture of this so you can actually see. But this right here of that square, I can see through it and I know that I have a nice straight line. And I'm going to move it over because I need to be able to connect the dots. Now I'm crooked. There we go. Okay. Connect those dots. And I know this sounds very interesting, and I agree. It is kind of interesting, but this is, if your 1/4 inch isn't exactly right, the directions tell you to sew a fat quarter, or not a fat quarter, but a regular 1/4 inch for the first round, and then a scant 1/4 inch for the rest. Well, if you look at this is why I got really confused. That is not 1/4 inch, okay? And remember, I can lay it right down, make sure that my dotted lines are on the fabric. And if you look, my dots, if you look in the holes, you would see that my dots are all lined up, okay? So that's why it got confused. And I will tell you, I was cutting this off. You don't have to, okay? You want to have that little extra, that's fine. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. So you will see a couple of these, right? And I'll use this one too so that you can see how that progresses. But basically now that I'm drawing these because when I go to sit down and sew, I'm going to make sure that I'm sewing on that line so that my needle is going through that line. That way I know that this square is going to turn out exactly like it's supposed to. Okay? All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a fabric. And it doesn't matter. This is, remember, cut at 2 inches. And we want to start with the wide first. Okay? You have your center square and you have your wide. Okay? It doesn't really much matter how long it is, as long as it's longer than the piece you're working with, okay? And then you want to lay them so they're right sides together. So whenever you put your dots on, you want to make sure that fabric is wrong side facing up. This is a solid, so I totally forgot to say that, because there is no right or wrong side. Kind of nice, right? So we're going to do that, and then we're going to take our ruler and we're going to do a rough cut. It doesn't have to be exact. We're going to trim it off anyway, but you do want to make sure you're giving yourself enough room that if you cut crooked, you're not going to short yourself later, okay? And all we're going to do is I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, okay, with the right sides together, and I'm going to sew this seam all the way through the block, making sure that I'm staying lined up on that line, okay? Once you do that, you want to Usually 90% of the time you want to press, and we'll talk about that later, but you press away from the center, okay? You press towards the piece that you just added. Best way to explain that. Now, if you notice, this one's like, it's a little crazy, right? We've got all kinds of stuff going on here. And I will show you, I stitched right on that line, okay? All the way through. But I can't add anything to that. You always want to try and lay this down and put that last piece that you just put on to the top. And then what I'm going to do, this is where the smaller ruler comes in. I'm going to set this down, okay? And I'm going to make it straight. I'm going to cut off this extra right here. Okay. So that I have a nice straight line. Okay. Because remember, we're adding clockwise. Okay. And because we're adding clockwise, we're going to turn counterclockwise. Okay. So this is the next we're going to add. And it's too wide, too narrow. Too wide, too narrow. So I'm just to help keep this straight for you guys and understanding which row is which, I'm going to use the same fabric. And I, again, am going to lay it right on top. All right. And I'm going to cut it just a tidbit bigger. Okay. All right. Now, if you will notice at this point, our marked line is through that center square, but it doesn't go on. So if you really want to get accurate and make sure you're staying nice and straight, I line up the seam or edge of the fabric. I could actually line up the seam. We could do that. That works good. And remember, when I draw a line, I got to be able to see it a little bit, right? Because I can't draw through the ruler. So the ruler should be just slightly inside. And then I'm going to finish that. And that's where I got the other color, because goodness forbid that I have the same. And I drew myself the rest of that line. Oh, and you know what? I could really get fun. Put that back on there for a second. We can actually make that line go all the way to the end. There we go. There we go. So I'm going to stitch right through here, okay? Remember, this is right sides. The bottom one is right side facing up, and this is my back side. So the right side of the top is right sides together, okay? Right sides together, and we're going to go ahead and stitch that line, okay? So I'll see you in just a sec. So I wanted to come back at you with two different methods that I used, okay? So the first one is where I cut the square down. Can you tell the difference between the two? This is where I didn't cut it. I just put the marks on it. This one, I cut the two edges once I put it on the seam guide. I went ahead and cut off the two edges, okay? So you can see there's already a difference, okay? So it really doesn't matter, but if you don't cut the square down, we're going to start with that one first. We just added two wide strips, okay? The only time you do this is the first round, but we are going to take the center seam guide. Just want to make sure you can see the seam guide center square right here, okay? And there's a black line and a dotted line. The dotted line is your seam guide. That's what helped us cut down the first round, right? Or the first square. Well, now we're going to take that black line, and now you're going to line that up so it's on the seam. And it's nice and straight. Okay? Once you're there, and notice this is the wide side happens to be here, okay? And the wide strips are down below, okay? And then we're simply going to cut two edges off. Okay? That is how the instructions tell you to do this, and I understand the mythology behind it, so I'm going to keep going with it. Now, if we already cut down our square, what you will find is that it actually the dotted line fits right inside of the square. There's no extra on the black. Not a big deal, whichever way you choose to do this. I feel like I'm not straight. All right. And then you'll just cut off the extra wide strips. Okay? Either way, doesn't matter. You still get to the same result. It should look like this. Okay? So we took that seam guide center square. We had the wide strips facing towards us. Basically, the ruler's upside down from us. We line up those seam lines, and then we cut off the extra. Okay? So then you should have, at the end of the day, they look the same. Minus this craziness over here, but that's normal. Okay, so remember, we're always pressing towards the new piece. And you can see I'm stitching right on that line that I talked about, okay? And I press towards the new piece. Remember, we're building clockwise, so we're going to turn the block counterclockwise, and this is the next one. So now it's a narrow strip. We did 2 wide, 2 narrow, 2 wide, 2 narrow. That's the name of the game, okay? So I'm actually going to do 2 at a time. Why not? And before I do that, let's go ahead and mark some lines. So I'm keeping still nice and straight because we're still working on that same block. Okay, we're still, nope, that one's not going to be long enough anymore. We're still working on that with that center block. It's that first row going around the center block that is really important. Okay. Just making sure I'm staying straight. Whoop. Get a little white on my black. Get a little purple on my print. Okay. There's one. Whoop. All right, here we are. This is the one we just added. I'm going to turn it because this is the next line. Flip it over. This is where we're going to stitch. I'm going to put my ruler down. We want it nice and straight. Okay. Going to partially redraw one line because I notice it's perfectly straight. I am now. Okay. And again, I'm going to line them up, giving myself a little extra over here and a little extra on the other side. Doesn't have to be perfectly straight, just needs to give yourself enough room. Oh boy, almost did that wrong. So go like this, there we go. And notice too that I'm putting it on top of the strip. There's no seams underneath there, so we don't have to worry about a whole bunch. Now this one I can use for another center in the future, okay? I'm gonna put that one over there. And I'm gonna go sew this line, okay, on each one of these, and you're going to get this monstrosity, okay? There we have our first, this will be our narrow, and if you look, this isn't a straight line, so I'm first going to give myself a nice straight line, shave off all the ickies. Doesn't seem to be straight, but it is sewn straight, so we're going to run with it. All right, there we go. Now on this one, we need wide, wide, narrow, narrow. So I'm going to another background fabric, flip it on, make sure this is the one, it got pressed towards the new block, turn it counterclockwise, flip it over, cut a little extra, and this time it's the last one. It's the very last one of this block. So if you really wanted to, feel free to mark your line I'm looking at all kinds of lines to see that I'm straight everywhere. And I'm just going to give myself a nice straight line. Do it with the rest. And I will stitch this, and again, I will press towards this new strip, okay? So I'm going to sew this down, straight down, okay? And then press it towards the new strip, okay? The directions do make that very clear. There's only one time I'm going to suggest different, but it's just a suggestion. If you follow the rules, and the reason is because we're building as we go, so if you're pressing away, you're eliminating the bulk in the center because there's a lot of seams going on in here. So it'll help keep this lay flatter and more straight. Just be careful when you press not to go cattywampus and swirl when you press, but literally press it open, nice and press, not iron, right? To try to keep these all nice and straight, okay? So I'm going to go sew this, and then I will come right back at you. So once we have that last background on, or last narrow strip, now we're going to trim this whole thing up, okay? Because we've done wide, wide, narrow, narrow. That whole thing is round one. I try to keep the colors the same for this so that you could see this is round one. That's part of it. Wide, wide, narrow, narrow, okay? So then we get out our trusty ruler, okay? And we're going to start with the narrow side. So we want to look at the ruler for the narrow round one square. And if you have sewn it correctly, it will fit right inside that center square, okay? And this dotted line, I know it's hard to see, but there's a dotted line here. It's along the seam, and then there's a dotted line that extends, and it is along that seam. So then I know I'm straight. The narrow are both on the outside, so I can cut two sides of the narrow. Okay. Then we're going to turn the block so that our wides are up, and then we're going to turn the ruler. We're going to look for wide round one. Again, if you sewed correctly, the wide round one will fit inside, and your two solid lines will be aligned with your seam, okay? And actually this dotted line goes with that seam. How fun is that? So we have the wide up here. So we're going to be cutting the two wides, okay? Then if we take a gander at our instructions, we want to make sure that it looks like this, okay? So I've got my C in the middle here, and I've got a narrow, a wide, and a wide. It does in fact look like the picture. So we're on the right track here. So now we're starting round two. Now round one, wide, wide, narrow, narrow. So guess what? Wide, wide, narrow, narrow. Okay. So let's go ahead and, boys, it is messy. Let's take our colorful wide print. Now remember, this is the last one I put on. Press towards it, okay? So we're going to do this side. We're going to add it to this side because we're building clockwise, okay? So this is our next side for round two. So I usually turn it up and then flip it so I don't get confused. Oop, and this one, yep, okay. Just want to make sure. Ask me how many times I've gotten that confused, and remember we're always right sides together, okay? We're going to cut a little extra. Now at this point, if you would like to start pinning, it's good to pin at any point, right? I just noticed as this thing continues to grow, there are pins that I like to put in it, and I probably just put one at the front and at the end here just to anchor it and not have to worry about it. At this point, the directions do tell you to sew a scant 1/4 inch. I think mine is set up. We're going to find out as we go, and if I'm not set up, I will show you what I do to compensate for it. Okay, so at any rate, we've cut our round 2. Okay, we're going to stitch a scant 1/4 inch. If you're wondering what a scant is, you have a regular quarter, and a scant is just a thread skinnier, literally. It's like a thread or two, just barely shifts. Okay, just tiny bit, a thread width, literally a thread. Like if you did a spool of thread, you know, you have that thread. It's that much, hardly any at all. Okay, just a tad bit skinnier. All right, so we're going to find out, because I'm going to stitch this with what I believe is my scant 1/4 inch. And you're going to get, remember, you'll add it, and then you'll press towards that new piece. Okay, so we have pressed towards that new piece. Okay, again, we need a straight edge. I mean, this is like repeat on repeats. I mean, like I said, once you start to get in a rhythm, you will honestly, it'll start to just flow. So I'm going to cut a nice straight edge. And then we're still on, we've only added 1 wide. So now I need another wide. Okay. Oh, this is my new one. This is going clockwise. This is the new side. So I like to spin it going up and flip it over. And I have sewn it to the wrong side. You'll figure it out when you open it. All right, we're going to cut that piece. And again, we will stitch this 1/4 inch, okay? Scant 1/4 inch, it says in the instructions. So we're going to stitch this down. Now notice this one, I don't know, it seems a little longer than, oh, it is a little longer because we have that piece on there. So as this continues to grow, I do like to pin to keep it stable. So let's get that done, and I'll see you for the next step. Okay, we've got our second round of 2 wide. So we need to make this straight. Okay. And it's really nice that we have nice long seams. And so I'm going to make it straight. And then we're going to add our skinnies, which happens to be my black. And I want to tell you I had to cut more strips. So I did them at 1.5. Oh boy. We're going to see how it works. Okay, so this is the one we just added. We want to add over here. Okay. I'm going to put it right on top. Cut. And sew with our scant 1/4 inch seam. Okay, as the directions suggest. And sew right along here. All right. Then what we will get is this one. Now, I got a little excited and I already cleaned this edge. So we added this one, pressing towards it. This is our skinny. We need another skinny, which will be on this side. First, you want to make sure you have a nice straight edge. Turn it so it's facing up. Flip it on over. Okay. I will tell you, I've been used to messing with 1 3/4 inch, so these feel skinnier, which could add to it, you know. If you don't like smaller, skinnier pieces, just cut them as big as you like, as long as they're at least 1 1/4 inch is what it says. So 1.5 inches should work. Then we're going to sew this 1/4 inch, okay? And press going towards the new piece. All right. Then you will get this beautiful square. Now, I actually cut pretty darn close, but you can see I have, let's do it, my center square, round 1, which is wide, wide, skinny, skinny, round 2, wide, wide, skinny, skinny. So now we need to get our trusty Curvy log cabin tool, and I don't know why, but I always start with this, with the narrow. This is round 2. So there is a round 2 narrow square, and that's where we're going to put the center square with the round 2 on the top and the right. Okay, so if we've sewn things correctly, everything should line up. What that means is we have a dotted line for this seam and a dotted line for this seam. And if you've sewn them, everything's correct and straight, then the line should match up, and so should the square. Okay. Okay, I'm liking this. So then I'm going to trim here and here for my narrows. Okay. Then I'm going to turn the block so that I have the wide and the wide on the top and the outside. Turn the ruler. We look for wide round 2. Place that in the center square. And again, this is so cool, guys. Your seam should line up. This should line up. I can actually come over just a bit. I want to make sure we're nice and straight. Whoop. So I think my pressing got a little crazy. And it did. But everything looks okay. I've got this nice dotted line. Now it turns white, but it's still there, okay? So again, once everything is nice and straight, I'm going to cut one side, 2 sides, okay, of my wide, all right? And this is what we will end with. Now, if we get out our trusty pamphlet, this is the second round, so we put it where the C is here, and if we look, it looks identical to what's going on here. Thank goodness, right? So that's round 2. We did the center, wide, wide, skinny, or narrow, narrow, wide, wide, narrow, narrow. This is the last one that we have added. I know it because I can see it. It's got 1 stitch going all the way across, okay? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add, well, that one's not long enough. We're going to add a wide to this side. Right side facing up. Line it up. And we're going to go ahead and you're going to do the same method. 2 wides going clockwise and 2 narrows going clockwise. When you're done with that, I'll show you how to trim the rest of the block, okay? We'll have the whole round 3. Now, the directions do tell you to press going up to the new, whatever you just added, that's the direction that you press towards, okay? Now, I'm going to do that on one of them, and on another one, I'm going to press going in. And I want to show you why, and I want you to see what happens, okay? So let me get 2 of these done for you, and we'll come back with round 3, which is our last and final round. I'll see you in just a sec. So we have 2 of our blocks done with center, wide, wide, narrow, narrow, wide, wide, narrow, narrow, wide, wide, narrow, narrow. So those are 3 rounds that we have. So we're going to go ahead and trim this block. And then I want to show you something that I found, okay? So when you do your round 3, I don't know why, but I always start with the narrow. You want to find the white box that says round 3. It also says the center square cut 1.5, okay? So you put that block right in the center. The other narrows are with you. Now I will tell you, this white line is wider. And I also noticed that my 1/4 inch got slightly off. Not much, but a little, and it's okay. Okay? It's going to be fine. I have this seam going. I have this seam, at least it's equal. I noticed that it's a little off, but it's not much. It's going to be fine. And all these little lines match up. And I'm in that center square. And if you'll notice, we can trim all 4 sides, okay? There's 1, 2, and you know, Creative Grids has those, if you see those circles, that's the grippies. You can turn your mat, you can turn your body, you can do whatever it is that you need to do. If you have a rotating mat, it's a good time to use it. Okay. Whoop. Make sure you've cut all the sides correctly before you move that ruler, okay? All right, get all that out of the way. And now we have our perfect curvy log cabin. And you know, the only thing that really makes it curvy is that these are skinnier and these are wider. That's basically it. And I do happen to really enjoy this ruler. At first I was a little frustrated trying to get that center. Now I wanted to show you something. This center, which I've been using throughout the video, was perfect. And this is the one that I didn't trim at the beginning. I left it at 1.5 and I lined up like I showed in the pictures, the white on the fabric, the white dashed lines that are down here, those white dashed lines, okay? And this one and this one both, I didn't do that. I trimmed it first. And let me show you what happened. And I don't have an answer for you, but if we take that center square and I line it up, I'm off just a smidge, okay? If I do it over here, this is the other one of which I did, I'm off just a little, okay? So I wanted to point that all out because I found that to be an interesting thing that happened. So it's always good to follow directions. And the directions say, leave it bigger. And so within those points that we marked, it does work. I can vouch for that. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and you know, I probably need to leave the clapper down a little bit longer for it to lay a little flat. However, this one I pressed all going out, away from the center, always towards the new piece that I just added on. On round 3 of this one, I pressed going towards the center. Okay, there's a lot more bulk going on in here. However, the reason I like doing that is when I go to put these together, my seams will all nest, okay? They will nest inside there for me to be able to stitch them together. That's the only reason. So I like to do one out, like the directions say, and one in. If we press them all going the same direction out, then your seams are not going to nest. They'll both be heading the same direction. So it's completely up to you. This does tend to lay flatter because all of that bulk is pushed out, okay? I still have one more side to sew in this one. So those are my tips and tricks, and I will see you guys in just a sec. Wasn't that fun? So once you really start getting into the motion of it and getting into it's a rhythm that you fall into. And remember I kept saying, I don't know why I always want to do the narrow first. It's because that's what the instructions tell you to do. And it's nice because when you do that final round, you know, we've got the center, wide, wide, narrow, narrow, wide, wide, narrow, narrow. I'm going to sing that for days. I'm going to drive Michael crazy. At any rate, you still want to line up with the narrow on the top. It's just something, you know, to create a habit. And if that's what the directions tell us to do, it's working. Don't fix what ain't broke, right? So once you get that first square, it's that first round going around that center square, everything else should fall in line, okay? So just to let you all know, I'm going to switch the camera and I want you to see my finished product. So there she is. Isn't she pretty? Now I need to press her really good and lay some clappers down and let it rest. I was in a hurry with the video, so I didn't use my clapper appropriately. But I love this. I think it turned out great. Now this is a circle, and because of the size, this actually finishes at 12, right like this. It's 12.5 inches. So when you're lining up your ruler, you line up, if you have a 12.5 inch ruler, it lines up straight down the middle at 6 1/4. And the 12.5-inch Creative Grids ruler has a circle. You put that right in the center, and then you can make sure everything is nice and square and pretty and ready for you to attach. I really like this size because you can do a table runner. I'm thinking this is a placemat. I mean, your plate fits right nicely right here. I'm loving that idea. With a matching table runner, hello, or a wall hanging. And there's so many things. Remember, I did show you guys that they talk about in the directions. They do talk about doing an option of courthouse step blocks. Now that would be really cool too. I think I might try that in the future. It's on the bucket list. What else isn't? But I wanted to share, there are other patterns. So a lot of times we buy specialty rulers and then they get one-time use. Oh no, we've got all kinds of things. And in the house we currently do have rainbow swirls. Look at the curves on that, okay? And just to show you, look at those beautiful curves. Wouldn't that be fun? And the color, oh my goodness, gotta love all of the colors. This would be another fun one. There are a lot of different patterns out there related to this ruler. So if you buy the ruler and find the patterns, you've got a lot of things that you can do with this ruler, okay? So I wanted to share that with you guys. There are other options besides just a circle. So there she is, the 6-inch. So that's why this finishes at 12.5, and in a quilt it's 12 inches. But it's the 6-inch Curvy log ruler by Creative Grids. I really fell in love with this. I think it's just a wonderful tool. That trim tool for your curvy log cabin makes it a little easier and a lot more fun, and you just square as you go and come out with a beautiful block. Love it. Okay, again, I will be on today with Mayhem at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Why? Because we're in Virginia for a live Q&A. I hope to see you all there. If I have something to add, I'll make sure to do it there. And if you have any questions, you can drop them down below. I'll be sure to get back to you. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to join the live and ask them there. So until next time, guys, may you all continue to be inspired, productive, ever so joyful, never stop believing, and never stop making your dreams in quilting come true. We love y'all. Happy quilting. Whoop whoop. Happy hump day. Happy Wednesday. And we will see you all soon.